I thought I knew what freedom felt like. I spent 30 years doing the right thing. I followed every rule. I trusted every official. I believed that if you stayed organized and prepared, nothing bad could happen to you. I planned this trip for months: museums, history, architecture, a celebration of finally living for myself. I printed every reservation. I saved every address. I packed light and smart. I told myself this was safe. This was what women my age did after divorce and retirement. This was normal. I was careful. I was responsible. I had nothing to hide. But somewhere between a guided tour and a hotel lobby, someone decided I was useful. Not because I was smart or dangerous. Because I looked harmless. Because I looked forgettable. Because at 56, with my careful smile and my printed itinerary, nobody would ever suspect me. I became a carrier without knowing it. I held something illegal in my hands and walked through streets, cafes, and checkpoints like everything was fine. I smiled at strangers. I thanked people. I took photos. And the whole time, I was one random inspection away from losing everything. My freedom. My name. My life. I didn't realize it until I opened the wrong bag at the wrong moment. And when I saw what was inside, my blood went cold. Because I understood immediately. If they caught me with this, no explanation would save me. No one would believe a middle-aged American tourist. No one would care that I didn't know. The laws don't care about intentions. The system doesn't care about fear. And the people who used me were counting on that. They were counting on me being too scared to run, too confused to fight back, too polite to cause a scene. But they didn't know one thing. I wasn't ready to die in a foreign prison. Before we continue, please comment below which city you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like. I landed in Prague on a Tuesday morning in late September. I was 56 years old, divorced for 6 months, retired for 3. And for the first time in my entire adult life, I had no one to take care of but myself. My name is Margaret Collins. I taught 4th grade for 30 years in a suburb outside of Cleveland. I was good at it. The kids liked me. The parents trusted me. I showed up every day. I graded papers at night. I volunteered for committees. I did everything right. At home, I did the same thing. I cooked dinner. I managed the bills. I kept the house clean. I scheduled doctor appointments for my ex-husband because he never remembered. I drove my aging mother to her treatments every Thursday for 2 years until she passed. I raised my daughter. I supported her through college. I never complained. I thought that was what you did. You gave. You worked. You held everything together. And one day you looked up and realized no one actually needed you anymore. My daughter lives in Seattle now. She has her own life, her own apartment, a boyfriend I met once on FaceTime. She calls me on Sundays, but the calls are short. She is busy. I understand. My mother died 3 years ago. My father went 6 years before that. My ex-husband, Richard, told me last March that he wanted a divorce. He said he felt like we had been roommates for the last decade. He said he wanted to feel alive again. He moved in with a woman from his gym 2 weeks after the papers were signed. She is 41. I saw her photo on Facebook. She has long hair and does yoga. I deactivated my account after that. I retired in June. The school district threw me a small party, cake in the teacher's lounge, a card everyone signed, a gift certificate to a restaurant I never went to. I cleaned out my classroom on a Friday afternoon. I took home my books and my photos and a mug that said "World's Best Teacher." I cried in my car in the parking lot, not because I was sad to leave, but because I realized I had nothing to go home to. An empty house. Silence. A calendar with nothing written on it. I spent July and August trying to figure out what to do. I painted the guest bedroom. I joined a book club but only went once. I tried yoga but felt out of place. Everyone there was younger, thinner, more flexible. I quit after 3 classes. I started walking in the mornings just to have something to do. One day, I walked past a travel agency. I stopped and looked in the window. There was a poster of Prague, old buildings, a bridge, a castle on a hill. It looked peaceful. It looked like a place where I could breathe. I went inside. A young woman asked if she could help me. I said I wanted to plan a trip. She asked where I wanted to go. I pointed at the poster. She smiled. She said Prague was beautiful. She asked if I was traveling with someone. I said no. Just me. She didn't react. She didn't ask why. She just opened her computer and started showing me options. Hotels, tours, flights. I picked everything carefully. I wanted a small hotel in a safe area. I wanted walking tours, museums, history. Nothing crazy, nothing risky. She printed everything for me. Confirmations, itineraries, emergency contacts. I paid with my credit card. I left with a folder full of papers and a feeling I hadn't felt in years. Hope. My daughter didn't understand. I called her the night I booked the trip. I told her I was going to Prague for 2 weeks. She went quiet. Then she said, "Mom, are you sure that's a good idea?" I asked why not. She said, "You've never traveled alone. You don't speak the language. What if something happens?" I told her I would be fine. I told her I had everything planned. She said, "I just think maybe you should wait. Maybe go somewhere closer. Maybe take someone with you." I said there was no one to take. She didn't respond to that. The conversation ended badly. She said she loved me, but I could hear the worry in her voice. I knew she thought I was having some kind of breakdown. Maybe I was. But I didn't care. I spent the next 6 weeks preparing. I researched everything. I read articles about solo travel for women over 50. I watched YouTube videos about Prague. I learned a few phrases in Czech. Thank you. Excuse me. Where is the bathroom? I bought a new suitcase. I packed light. Comfortable shoes, layers, a rain jacket, my camera, a journal. I made copies of my passport. I wrote down the address of the U.S. Embassy. I told my neighbor I would be gone. I asked her to check my mail. I paid all my bills ahead of time. I did everything I could think of to make sure nothing went wrong. The night before my flight, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I thought about Richard. I thought about my classroom. I thought about my mother. I thought about all the years I spent being useful, being needed, being responsible. And I realized this trip wasn't just about seeing a new place. It was about proving something, to myself, to my daughter, to everyone who thought I couldn't do it. I was 56. I was alone. But I was still here. And I wasn't done living yet. The flight was fine. Long, but fine. I slept a little. I watched a movie. I read my book about Czech history. When we started descending, I looked out the window. I could see the city below. Red rooftops. A river cutting through the middle. It looked smaller than I expected, more manageable. I felt my heart beat faster, not from fear, from excitement. I cleared customs easily. The officer glanced at my passport and stamped it. He didn't ask any questions. I grabbed my suitcase and found the shuttle to the city center. I sat by the window and watched everything go by. The buildings were different. The signs were in a language I couldn't read. The cars were smaller. I felt like I was in a movie. Like this wasn't real. But it was. I was really here. The hotel was exactly what I booked. Small, clean, quiet. The front desk clerk was a young man with dark hair. He smiled when I checked in. He asked if this was my first time in Prague. I said yes. He said I picked a good time to visit. September was quieter. Less tourists. Better weather. He gave me a map and circled a few places I should see. A cafe nearby. A park. A bookstore. I thanked him. I carried my suitcase up 3 floors because there was no elevator. My arms hurt by the time I got to my room, but I didn't care. The room was small. A bed. A desk. A narrow window overlooking the street below. I unpacked slowly. I hung my clothes in the closet. I lined up my shoes. I set my toiletries in the bathroom. I plugged in my phone. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around. This was mine. This room. This trip. This moment. No one could take it from me. I called my daughter. I told her I made it. I told her the flight was fine and the hotel was nice. She asked if I was scared. I lied and said no. She told me to be careful. She told me to check in every day. I promised I would. After we hung up, I looked at myself in the mirror. My hair was gray. I stopped dyeing it after the divorce. My face had lines I didn't used to notice. I looked tired. But I also looked determined. I looked like someone who had decided to stop waiting for permission. The first morning, I woke up early. I didn't set an alarm, but my body was still on Ohio time. I showered. I dressed in comfortable pants and a sweater. I grabbed my purse and my camera and my map. I walked downstairs and out into the street. The air was cool. The sky was cloudy but not dark. I could smell coffee from somewhere nearby. I followed the smell and found a small cafe 2 blocks away. I went inside. A woman behind the counter looked at me. I pointed at a pastry in the case and held up one finger. She nodded. I pointed at the coffee machine. She nodded again. I paid in cash. I had exchanged money at the airport. I sat by the window and ate slowly. I watched people walk by. Everyone looked like they knew where they were going. I didn't. And for the first time in 30 years, that felt okay. I spent the morning walking. I didn't have a plan. I just followed streets that looked interesting. I crossed a bridge. I stopped to look at the water. I took photos of buildings I didn't know the names of. I went into a bookstore and looked at books I couldn't read. I sat on a bench in a square and watched pigeons. I felt invisible. Not in a bad way. In a freeing way. No one here knew me. No one knew I was divorced or retired or alone. I was just another person. Just another face. It felt good. That afternoon, I found a museum. It was about medieval history. I paid the entry fee and went inside. I spent 3 hours there. I read every sign. I looked at every display, armor, weapons, old documents, paintings of kings and battles. No one rushed me. No one told me to move faster. I could take as long as I wanted. When I finally left, the sun was starting to set. My feet hurt. My back hurt. But I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt like I mattered. Not because I was useful to someone else, but because I chose to be here. Because I made this happen. I had dinner at a small restaurant near the hotel. I ordered soup and bread. The waiter barely spoke English, but he was patient. He brought me what I pointed to on the menu. It was warm and filling. I ate alone, but I didn't feel lonely. I felt proud. That night, I wrote in my journal. I wrote about the flight, the city, the museum, the feeling of being somewhere new. I wrote that I was glad I came, that I didn't regret it, that maybe my daughter was wrong. Maybe I could do this. The next day, I decided to do something more structured. I signed up for a walking tour. I found the company online before I left Cleveland. They had good reviews, small groups, English-speaking guides. The tour was supposed to start at 10 in the morning. I showed up 15 minutes early because that's what I always did. I was the first one there. Slowly, others arrived, 2 young couples. They looked like they were in their 30s. They talked quietly to each other. Then an older man showed up, maybe 60. He nodded at me. I nodded back. We didn't speak. A few minutes later, the guide arrived. He introduced himself as Stefan. He was maybe 40, tall, clean jacket, nice smile. He shook everyone's hand. When he got to me, he held my hand a second longer than the others. He said he was happy I joined the tour. I smiled. I said thank you. Stefan was good at what he did. He walked us through streets I hadn't seen yet. He pointed out buildings that survived wars. He told stories about kings and uprisings and ordinary people who lived centuries ago. He made history feel close, real. He answered every question. He made jokes. He was warm without being pushy. I liked him. He seemed genuine. At one point, he noticed I was taking a lot of photos. He stopped walking and asked if I wanted him to take one of me. I hesitated. I wasn't used to being in photos. I was always the one behind the camera. But I said yes. I handed him my camera. He took 3 pictures, different angles. He said I should have proof I was actually here. I laughed. I thanked him. He handed the camera back and smiled. The tour lasted 3 hours. We covered a lot of ground. My feet were sore by the end, but I didn't mind. I felt like I learned something. At the end, Stefan handed out business cards. He said if anyone wanted a private tour or had questions during their stay, they should reach out. He said he loved helping people experience Prague the right way. I took the card. I put it in my purse without thinking much about it. Everyone said goodbye. I walked toward my hotel but stopped for lunch at a cafe I hadn't tried yet. I ordered a salad and a glass of wine. I sat outside even though it was a little cold. I didn't care. I wanted to watch the street. I wanted to feel like I belonged there, like I wasn't just passing through. The wine was dry and sharp. The salad was fresh. I ate slowly. I thought about how strange it was that just a few months ago I was sitting in my kitchen in Ohio eating the same meals I always ate. And now I was here, in a different country, alone, making my own choices. It felt surreal, but it also felt right. That evening my phone buzzed. It was a message from a number I didn't recognize. It said, "Hi Margaret, this is Stefan from the tour today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you need any recommendations for restaurants or places to visit, feel free to ask. Prague has a lot of hidden spots most tourists miss." I stared at the message. I didn't remember giving him my number. Maybe I wrote it on the sign-up form. I couldn't remember. The message seemed friendly, professional. I didn't see anything wrong with it. I didn't respond right away, but I didn't delete it either. I figured it was just good customer service. The next day, I visited the Jewish quarter. I walked through old synagogues. I stood in the cemetery and looked at gravestones stacked on top of each other because there wasn't enough space. It was quiet, heavy. I thought about all the people who died there, all the lives that were erased. It made my problems feel small. My divorce, my loneliness, my fear of being irrelevant. None of it mattered compared to what happened in that place. I took fewer photos. Some things shouldn't be captured. They should just be felt. I left the cemetery feeling somber. I walked for a while without any destination. I ended up at a small park. I sat on a bench and watched children play. Their mothers sat nearby talking. I thought about my daughter when she was that age. How she used to hold my hand everywhere we went. How she used to need me. I missed that. But I also knew it was gone. She didn't need me anymore, and I had to be okay with that. That night, I had dinner at a quiet restaurant. I ordered chicken and potatoes. I drank water. I wrote in my journal. I wrote that I was starting to understand why I came here. It wasn't just about seeing museums or taking photos. It was about sitting with myself, about being alone without distractions, about figuring out who I was when no one else was watching. When I got back to the hotel, I saw another message from Stefan. It said, "Have you been to the castle yet? Most tourists go during the day when it's crowded. It's much better at sunset. If you want, I could take you tomorrow evening. Private tour, no charge. I enjoyed talking to you during the group tour." I read the message twice. It seemed generous, maybe too generous, but I didn't sense anything wrong. He was polite, professional. And I thought it would be nice to see the castle without fighting through crowds. I thought about it for a few minutes. Then I replied. I said yes. I said that sounded nice. He responded almost immediately. He said he would pick me up at my hotel at 5. The next day, I spent the morning at another museum. This one was about communist history. It was dark and sobering. Photos of protests, stories of people who disappeared, propaganda posters. I walked through the exhibits slowly. I thought about how lucky I was, how easy my life had been compared to the people who lived through that. I had never been afraid of my government. I had never been silenced. I had never been forced to hide. My problems were small, comfortable, first world problems. I felt guilty for ever complaining. I left the museum around noon. I grabbed lunch at a small cafe. I ordered tea and a sandwich. I sat outside and watched people. I thought about Stefan, about the private tour. I told myself it was fine. He was a professional. This was his job. There was nothing strange about it. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I felt a small flicker of unease. Not enough to cancel. Just enough to notice. At 5, I was waiting in the lobby of my hotel. Stefan arrived exactly on time. He was wearing the same clean jacket. He smiled when he saw me. He said I looked ready for an adventure. I laughed. I said I hoped the castle was worth the walk. He said it absolutely was. We walked together through the city. He took a route I hadn't seen before. Narrow streets, fewer tourists. He talked the whole time, about architecture, about history, about his own life. He said he grew up in Prague. He said he loved showing people his city. He asked about me, about Ohio, about why I came to Prague alone. I told him I was recently divorced, recently retired. He nodded. He said that took courage. I said I wasn't sure about that. He said most people never do what I did. Most people just stayed in place. He said I should be proud. We reached the castle just as the sun started to set. The light was golden. The view over the city was beautiful. Stefan walked me through the courtyards. He showed me details I wouldn't have noticed on my own. Carvings, hidden symbols. He told stories about kings and architects. He was good at this. He made everything feel personal, like he was sharing secrets. At one point, he stopped in front of a small shop inside the castle grounds. He said they sold handmade items, traditional crafts. He said most tourists missed it because it wasn't on the main path. He asked if I wanted to look inside. I said sure. We went in. The shop was small and cluttered. Shelves full of wooden toys, pottery, glassware, embroidered linens. An older woman sat behind the counter. She nodded at Stefan. He nodded back. They seemed to know each other. Stefan picked up a small wooden box. It was carved with intricate designs, flowers and vines. He said it was traditional Czech craftsmanship. He said it would make a good souvenir, something meaningful. I looked at it. It was beautiful. I asked how much. He spoke to the woman in Czech. She answered. He turned to me and said it was 30 euros. I hesitated. It felt expensive for a small box. But Stefan said it was worth it. He said these were made by hand. He said I wouldn't find anything like it in the tourist shops downtown. I believed him. I paid for the box. The woman wrapped it in tissue paper and placed it in a small cloth bag. She handed it to me. I thanked her. Stefan smiled. He said I made a good choice. We left the shop and continued walking. The sun was almost gone now. The sky was turning purple. Stefan said we should head back before it got too dark. We walked down the hill toward the city. He talked about restaurants I should try, neighborhoods I should explore. He said if I wanted, he could show me more hidden spots, places locals went. I said maybe. I said I still had a week left. He said that was plenty of time. When we reached my hotel, he stopped at the door. He said he hoped I enjoyed the evening. I said I did. I thanked him. He said it was his pleasure. Then he said something that stuck with me. He said, "You know, Margaret, you're different from most tourists. You actually care about the city. You pay attention. Most people just take photos and leave. But you're really here." I didn't know what to say to that. I just smiled. I said good night. He said good night. I went inside. In my room, I set the wooden box on the desk. I looked at it for a moment. It really was beautiful. I thought about showing it to my daughter when I got home. I thought about putting it on a shelf in my living room. A reminder that I did this. That I went somewhere. That I was brave enough to be alone. I got ready for bed. I checked my phone. My daughter had sent a message asking how I was. I replied and said everything was fine. I said I was having a good time. I said I felt safe. She sent back a heart emoji. I smiled. I set my phone on the nightstand. I turned off the light. I lay in the dark and listened to the sounds of the city outside my window. Cars, voices, distant music. I felt calm. I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I didn't know then that everything was about to change. I didn't know that the small wooden box sitting on my desk wasn't just a souvenir. I didn't know that I had already made the mistake that would turn my trip into a nightmare. I didn't know that Stefan wasn't who I thought he was. I didn't know any of it. I just went to sleep thinking I was safe. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. I wanted to visit the National Gallery. I read that it had an incredible collection of medieval art. I showered and dressed and went downstairs for breakfast. The same young man was at the front desk. He smiled and asked how my trip was going. I said it was wonderful. He said he was glad. I left the hotel and walked toward the gallery. The streets were busier than usual. It was Saturday. More people were out, families, couples. I walked slowly. I stopped to look in shop windows. I bought a coffee from a street vendor. I felt relaxed, like I was finally getting the hang of this. Of being alone in a foreign place. Of not needing anyone. I spent 4 hours in the gallery. Room after room of paintings and sculptures. Religious art mostly. Madonnas and saints and crucifixions. The colors were faded but still beautiful. I sat on benches and just looked. I didn't rush. I didn't check my watch. I let myself get lost in it. When I finally left, it was past 2 in the afternoon. I was hungry. I found a small restaurant nearby and ordered goulash. It was rich and heavy and exactly what I needed. After lunch, I walked along the river. The water was calm, gray. I watched boats go by, tourist boats full of people with cameras. I thought about taking one but decided against it. I liked walking better. I liked being on my own. I crossed a different bridge. This one was quieter, less crowded. I stopped in the middle and looked back at the city, the castle on the hill, the spires, the red rooftops. It looked like a postcard. I took a photo. Not for anyone else. Just for me. I got back to the hotel around 5. I was tired. My feet hurt. I went up to my room and lay down on the bed. I closed my eyes for a moment. When I opened them again, it was almost 7. I had fallen asleep. I sat up slowly. My back was stiff. I looked around the room. Everything was the same. My suitcase in the corner. My clothes hanging in the closet. The wooden box on the desk. I walked over to the desk and picked up the box. I ran my fingers over the carvings. I thought about opening it, but I didn't. I figured it was just empty inside. Just decorative. I set it back down. I thought about dinner. I wasn't very hungry. I decided to skip it. I made tea with the electric kettle in the room. I sat by the window and drank it slowly. I watched the street below. People coming and going, living their lives. My phone buzzed. Another message from Stefan. It said, "Hi, Margaret. I hope you had a nice day. I wanted to let you know there's a small concert tomorrow night at a church near your hotel. Classical music. Very intimate. I think you would enjoy it. Let me know if you want to go. I can get tickets." I stared at the message. He was being very attentive, very helpful. Part of me appreciated it. Part of me felt uncomfortable. I didn't know why. He hadn't done anything wrong. He was just being kind. But something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it. I wrote back and said, "Thank you, but I think I'll take it easy tomorrow. I've been walking a lot and I'm a bit tired." He responded quickly. He said, "Of course. Rest is important. Let me know if you change your mind." I set my phone down. I told myself I was being paranoid. Stefan was just a friendly tour guide. That's all. I finished my tea and got ready for bed. I brushed my teeth. I washed my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked older than I felt. Tired, but also different somehow. Stronger, maybe. Or just more aware. I got into bed and turned off the light. I tried to sleep, but my mind wouldn't stop. I kept thinking about Stefan, about the messages, about the wooden box, about how he knew the woman in the shop, about how quickly she wrapped it, about how he insisted I buy it. I told myself I was overthinking, but the unease stayed with me. The next day, I stayed close to the hotel. I didn't go far. I had breakfast at the same cafe. I walked through a nearby park. I sat on a bench and read my book. I checked my phone a few times. No new messages from Stefan. I felt relieved. And also a little foolish. Maybe I had been rude. Maybe I hurt his feelings. Maybe he was just trying to be nice and I shut him down. That afternoon, I decided to do laundry. The hotel had a small laundry room in the basement. I gathered my clothes and went downstairs. The room was empty. I loaded the machine and sat on a plastic chair to wait. I scrolled through my phone. I looked at photos I had taken. The bridge, the museum, the castle. They all looked beautiful. Like someone else's life. When the laundry was done, I carried it back upstairs. I hung everything up to dry. I looked at the wooden box again. I picked it up. I turned it over in my hands. I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A small seam along the bottom. Like it could open. I tried to pry it, but it didn't budge. I looked closer. There was a tiny latch hidden in the carving. I pressed it. The bottom slid open. My heart stopped. Inside was a small plastic bag, and inside the bag was a white powder. I dropped the box. It hit the floor. The bag stayed inside. I stood there frozen. My mind went blank. Then it started racing. What was this? Why was this here? What did I just buy? What did Stefan give me? I picked up the box with shaking hands. I looked at the powder again. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. I knew what it was. Or at least I knew it was something illegal. Something dangerous. Something that could get me arrested, deported, imprisoned. I sat on the bed. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight. My hands were trembling. I thought about Stefan, about how friendly he was, about how he took me to that shop, about how he insisted I buy this box, about how the woman wrapped it so quickly, about how he knew her. It wasn't random. It was planned. He used me. He gave me this thing and I carried it back to my hotel like an idiot. I walked through the streets with it. I brought it into my room. I had it with me this whole time. I felt sick. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall. I wiped my mouth. I tried to think. I needed to get rid of it. I needed to throw it away. But where? If I threw it in the trash and someone found it, they would trace it back to me. If I flushed it down the toilet, what if it didn't go down? What if it clogged? What if someone saw? I thought about going to the police. But what would I say? I bought a box from a shop and it had drugs in it. They wouldn't believe me. They would think I was lying. They would arrest me. I was a middle-aged American woman traveling alone. I had no proof, no witnesses, just a story, and the drugs in my room. I stood up slowly. I walked back into the room. I looked at the box on the floor. I picked it up. I closed the bottom. I set it back on the desk. I needed to think. I needed to stay calm. I couldn't panic. Panicking wouldn't help. I sat on the bed and tried to breathe. In and out, slowly. I thought about calling my daughter, but what would I tell her? That I was in trouble, that I was scared, that I might go to prison. She would lose her mind. She would blame herself for not stopping me from coming here. I couldn't do that to her. I thought about the embassy. But what could they do? I had contraband in my possession. That was a crime. They couldn't just make it go away. They would tell me to turn myself in. And then what? A trial. A foreign prison. My life over. My phone buzzed. I jumped. I looked at the screen. It was Stefan. The message said, "Hi, Margaret. Just checking in. I hope you're feeling better. I wanted to let you know I'll be leaving Prague for a few days. Work trip. But I'll be back next week. If you need anything before then, let me know." I stared at the message. He was leaving. Why was he telling me this? Was it a warning? Was he distancing himself? I didn't respond. I set the phone down. My hands were still shaking. I stood up and paced the room. I needed to think clearly. Stefan gave me the box. That meant he knew what was inside. That meant he wanted me to have it. But why? Why me? What was I supposed to do with it? Was I supposed to take it somewhere? Give it to someone? Was someone going to contact me? I thought about the hotel clerk, the young man at the front desk. Did he know? Was he part of this? I thought about every interaction I had since I arrived, every person I talked to, every place I went. Was I being watched? Was someone keeping track of me? I went to the window and looked outside. The street was normal. People walking, cars passing. No one looked suspicious. But that didn't mean anything. I wouldn't know what suspicious looked like. I was a retired teacher from Ohio. I didn't know anything about this world. I sat back down on the bed. I forced myself to think. I had two options. I could get rid of the box and pretend this never happened. Or I could try to figure out what Stefan wanted and protect myself. Both options felt impossible. Both options felt dangerous. I looked at the box again. I hated it. I hated that I bought it. I hated that I trusted Stefan. I hated that I was stupid enough to think he was just being nice. I wasn't special. I wasn't interesting. I was useful. That's all. I was a 56-year-old woman traveling alone. I looked harmless. I looked forgettable. I looked like someone no one would suspect. And that's exactly why he chose me. I felt anger rising in my chest. Not just at Stefan, at myself. For being naive. For thinking this trip would be simple. For believing I could just show up in a foreign country and everything would be fine. I was an idiot. A trusting, stupid idiot. But I couldn't fall apart. Not now. I needed to survive this. I needed to figure out what to do. I needed to get out of this room. Out of this hotel. Maybe out of this city. I looked at my suitcase. I could pack right now. I could check out. I could go to the airport. I could get on the first flight home. But what if they searched my bag? What if they found the box? I would be arrested at the airport. That was worse. That was the worst possible scenario. I couldn't take the box with me. And I couldn't leave it here. If I left it in the room and someone found it after I checked out, they would come after me. They would track me down. They would extradite me. I would end up in prison anyway. I was trapped. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. My mind kept spinning, going in circles. I thought about my daughter. About my classroom. About my house in Ohio. About my normal, boring, safe life. I wanted it back. I wanted to undo this trip. I wanted to go back to the day I walked past that travel agency and keep walking. But I couldn't. I was here. And I had to deal with it. My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look. But I did. It was a message from a number I didn't recognize. It said, "We know you have it. Don't do anything stupid. Someone will contact you soon." My blood went cold. They were watching me. I dropped the phone. It landed on the bed next to me. I stared at it like it was alive. Like it could hurt me. My hands were shaking so badly I had to press them against my legs to stop them. Someone was watching me. Someone knew I had the box. Someone knew where I was. I stood up and went to the window. I looked down at the street. I scanned every face, every person walking by. Was it the man in the blue jacket? Was it the woman with the shopping bag? Was it someone in one of the cars parked along the curb? I couldn't tell. Everyone looked normal. Everyone looked innocent. But someone down there was watching, or someone in a building across the street, or someone with access to cameras. I didn't know. I couldn't know. I stepped back from the window. I closed the curtain. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I sat on the edge of the bed and picked up my phone. I read the message again. We know you have it. Don't do anything stupid. Someone will contact you soon. It wasn't signed. No name. Just a threat. A promise. I thought about calling the police, but the message said, don't do anything stupid. That meant going to the police was stupid. That meant they were watching for that. If I called the police, something bad would happen. To me. Maybe to my daughter. I didn't know what these people were capable of. I didn't know what they wanted. I just knew they had power, and I had none. I looked at the wooden box on the desk. I wanted to smash it. I wanted to throw it out the window, but I couldn't. They told me not to do anything stupid. That meant I had to keep it. I had to wait. I had to do what they said. I paced the room, back and forth, my mind racing. I thought about leaving the hotel, just walking out, getting on a train, going to another city. But they knew where I was. If they were watching me, they would see me leave. They would follow. And then what? I would be alone in a city I didn't know with no plan and no help. At least here I had a room, a door I could lock, some small illusion of safety. I sat back down. I tried to think logically. They wanted me to carry something. That's what this was. Stefan gave me the box. Someone else was going to take it from me. That's how these things worked. I wasn't supposed to know. I was just supposed to be a carrier. A mule. But I opened the box. I saw what was inside, and now they knew I knew. That made me a risk. A liability. But they hadn't come for me yet. They sent a message. They told me to wait. That meant they still needed me. Or at least they hadn't decided what to do with me. I had time. Not much. But some. I thought about the message again. Someone will contact you soon. When? Today? Tomorrow? An hour from now? I didn't know. I had no control. I could only wait. I looked at the door. I had locked it when I came in, but I checked again. I turned the deadbolt. I put the chain on. It felt thin, flimsy, like it wouldn't stop anyone who really wanted to get in. But it was something. I sat on the bed with my back against the wall. I pulled my knees to my chest. I felt like a child. Small. Helpless. Stupid. I thought about all the decisions that led me here. Booking the trip. Trusting Stefan. Going to that shop. Buying the box. Every choice felt so innocent at the time. So normal. And now I was sitting in a hotel room in a foreign country with drugs hidden in a wooden box and people threatening me through my phone. I thought about my ex-husband. About how he said I never took risks. About how he said I lived a boring life. About how he left me for someone younger and more exciting. I wondered what he would think if he could see me now. Probably that I was an idiot. Probably that I proved his point. That I couldn't handle the world. That I needed someone to take care of me. I hated that he might be right. Hours passed. I didn't move. I sat on the bed and watched the light outside the window change. The sun set. The street lamps came on. My phone stayed silent. No new messages, no calls, just silence. Waiting. Around 9, I heard footsteps in the hallway. I froze. The footsteps stopped outside my door. I held my breath. I waited for a knock, for the door to open, for someone to force their way in. But nothing happened. The footsteps moved on. I heard a door open and close somewhere down the hall. Another guest. Just another guest. I exhaled slowly. I realized I was sweating. My shirt was damp. My hands were clammy. I stood up and went to the bathroom. I splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked terrible, pale, scared, old. I barely recognized myself. I went back into the room. I thought about eating, but I had no appetite. I thought about sleeping, but I knew I couldn't. I sat back down on the bed. I picked up my phone. I thought about texting my daughter, just to hear from her, just to feel connected to something normal. But I couldn't. I couldn't let her know something was wrong. She would hear it in my words. She would ask questions, and I couldn't answer them. I opened the message from the unknown number. I read it again. "We know you have it. Don't do anything stupid. Someone will contact you soon." I wanted to respond. I wanted to ask who they were, what they wanted, when they would leave me alone. But I didn't. I was too afraid of what they might say, or what they might do. I set the phone down. I lay back on the bed. I stared at the ceiling. I thought about all the things I took for granted. My house, my car, my freedom. The ability to walk outside without being afraid. The ability to sleep without checking the locks. The ability to trust people. All of it felt so far away now, like it belonged to someone else. Some version of me that didn't exist anymore. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. I grabbed it. Another message from the unknown number. It said, "Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Café Louvre. Sit alone. Bring the box. Don't be late." I read it 3 times. Tomorrow. I had until tomorrow. I looked at the time. It was 12:14 a.m. That gave me less than 14 hours. 14 hours to figure out what to do. 14 hours to decide if I was going to show up or run. But I already knew I didn't have a choice. If I ran, they would find me. If I went to the police, they would find me. If I did anything other than what they told me, they would find me. I was trapped. Completely trapped. I set the phone down. I turned off the light. I lay in the dark and listened to the sounds outside. Cars, voices, footsteps. Every sound made me tense, made me think someone was coming, but no one came. The night dragged on, endless, suffocating. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I just lay there waiting for morning, waiting for 2 p.m., waiting to find out what would happen to me. When the sun finally came up, I felt exhausted, hollowed out. I got out of bed and showered. I dressed in clean clothes. I packed the wooden box carefully in my purse. I looked at myself in the mirror one more time. I didn't look like someone who was about to meet criminals. I looked like a tourist, like a middle-aged woman on vacation. That was the point. That's why they chose me. I left the room and went downstairs. The young man at the front desk smiled and said good morning. I forced a smile back. I said good morning. He asked if I had plans for the day. I said just some sightseeing. He nodded. He said to enjoy myself. I said I would. I walked out into the street. The morning air was cool. The city was waking up. People heading to work. Tourists starting their days. Everything looked normal, peaceful. But I felt like I was walking through a nightmare, like none of this was real, like I had stepped into someone else's life. I found a cafe and ordered coffee. I sat by the window. I tried to drink, but my stomach was in knots. I checked the time. It was only 9. I had 5 hours. 5 hours to sit and wait and think about what might happen. 5 hours to imagine every possible outcome, none of them good. I thought about the cafe. Café Louvre. I looked it up on my phone. It was famous, historic, Full of tourists during the day. That made sense. They wanted a public place, somewhere crowded, somewhere I couldn't make a scene, somewhere they could blend in. I thought about what would happen when I got there. Someone would approach me. Someone would take the box. And then what? Would they let me go? Would they threaten me? Would they hurt me? I didn't know. I couldn't predict it. I could only wait. The hours crawled by. I left the cafe and walked. I didn't know where I was going. I just walked. I crossed bridges. I passed churches. I saw tourists taking photos and couples holding hands and children running through squares. Everyone looked happy, carefree. I hated them for it. I hated that their lives were simple, that they weren't afraid, that they could just exist without constantly looking over their shoulders. At 1:30, I made my way toward Café Louvre. I walked slowly. My legs felt heavy. My purse felt like it weighed 100 pounds. The wooden box inside pressing against my side. A reminder of how stupid I had been. How naive. I reached the cafe at 1:50. I stood outside for a moment. I looked through the windows. It was crowded, just like I expected. Tourists, locals, people drinking coffee and eating pastries. Normal. Safe. Except it wasn't. Not for me. I went inside. I found an empty table near the back. I sat down. I set my purse on the table. I ordered tea when the waiter came by. I didn't want it, but I needed to order something. He brought it, and I wrapped my hands around the cup. The warmth helped. A little. I checked the time. 1:58, 2 minutes. I looked around the cafe. I tried to figure out who it would be. The man in the corner reading a newspaper. The woman at the bar drinking espresso. The couple sitting 2 tables away. Anyone could be watching. Anyone could be part of this. At exactly 2 p.m., someone sat down across from me. It was a woman. Maybe 40. Short, dark hair, plain clothes. She looked like anyone else in the cafe. She didn't smile. She didn't introduce herself. She just sat down and looked at me. She said, "You have something for me." Her English was good, almost no accent. Her voice was calm, flat, like we were discussing the weather. I nodded. I couldn't speak. My throat was too tight. She said, "Give it to me." I reached into my purse. My hands were shaking. I pulled out the wooden box. I set it on the table between us. She picked it up without looking at it. She slipped it into her bag. Simple. Quick. Like a normal transaction. I thought she would leave. I thought that was it. But she didn't move. She looked at me. Her eyes were cold. Empty. She said, "You opened it." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. I nodded again. I didn't see the point in lying. She said, "That was stupid." I swallowed hard. I said, "I didn't know. I didn't know what it was." She tilted her head slightly. She said, "But now you do." I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say. She leaned forward. Her voice dropped lower. She said, "You're going to forget this happened. You're going to finish your vacation. You're going to go home. You're going to tell no one. Do you understand?" I nodded. I said, "Yes." She said, "If you go to the police, we'll know. If you tell anyone, we'll know, and we'll find you. Not here. Not now. But eventually. Do you understand?" I nodded again. My whole body was shaking now. I couldn't stop it. She stood up. She picked up her bag. She said, "Enjoy the rest of your trip, Margaret." She walked out. Just like that. She disappeared into the crowd on the street. I sat there frozen. My tea was cold. My hands were still shaking. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I waited 10 minutes. Then I left. I walked back toward my hotel. I kept looking over my shoulder. I kept expecting someone to follow me, but no one did. The streets were normal. The people were normal. Everything looked the same, but I felt completely different. I got back to my room and locked the door. I sat on the bed. I didn't move for a long time. I just sat there trying to process what had just happened. It was over. They took the box. They got what they wanted. I was free. But I didn't feel free. I felt marked. Contaminated. Like I would never be clean again. That night, I didn't leave the room. I ordered food from room service, but I couldn't eat it. I just picked at it and threw most of it away. I tried to sleep, but every sound made me jump. Every footstep in the hallway. Every door closing. Every car on the street below. I kept thinking they would come back, that this wasn't over, that they lied to me. But no one came. The next morning, I made a decision. I was leaving. I didn't care about the rest of my trip. I didn't care about the museums I hadn't seen or the places I hadn't visited. I wanted to go home. I needed to go home. I went online and changed my flight. There was a seat available the next day. I booked it. I didn't care about the fee. I just needed to get out. I spent the rest of the day in my room. I packed my suitcase. I checked my phone constantly. No new messages. Nothing from Stefan. Nothing from the unknown number. Just silence. I thought about calling my daughter, but I couldn't. Not yet. I couldn't talk to her until I was safe, until I was home, until I was far away from this place. That night, I barely slept again. I kept the lights on. I kept my suitcase by the door. I kept checking the locks. I felt like I was losing my mind, like I couldn't trust anything. Not the room, not the hotel, not the city, not myself. The next morning, I checked out early. The young man at the front desk asked if everything was okay. He said I still had several days left on my reservation. I told him something came up at home. Family emergency. He nodded. He said he understood. He processed my checkout. I paid the bill. I left. I took a taxi to the airport. I didn't look back at the city. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to remember it. I just wanted to leave. At the airport, I went through security. My heart was pounding the entire time. I kept thinking they would stop me, that someone would pull me aside, that this was all a trap. But they didn't. They waved me through. I collected my bag. I found my gate. I sat down and waited. The flight boarded on time. I got on. I found my seat. I put my suitcase in the overhead bin. I sat down by the window. I buckled my seatbelt. I closed my eyes. The plane took off. I felt it lift into the air. I felt the city fall away beneath me. And only then did I start to breathe. But even as we climbed higher, even as Prague became smaller and smaller below me, I knew I wasn't safe. Not really. They knew my name. They knew where I lived. They told me they would find me if I talked. And I believed them. I spent the entire flight looking at the people around me, wondering if any of them were watching, wondering if someone on this plane was part of it, wondering if I would ever feel safe again. When we landed in the States, I went through customs. The officer looked at my passport. He asked how my trip was. I said it was fine. He stamped my passport and handed it back. I walked through. I collected my suitcase. I walked out into the arrivals area. My daughter was waiting for me. She smiled when she saw me. She hugged me. She said, "Mom, you're back early. Is everything okay?" I said, "I just missed home." She looked at me. She could tell something was wrong, but she didn't push. She just said, "Okay, let's get you home." We drove back to my house. She talked the whole way, about her job, about her boyfriend, about things happening in Seattle. I barely heard her. I just nodded. I said yes and no in the right places. But my mind was somewhere else. Still in Prague, still sitting across from that woman, still hearing her voice. "We'll find you." When we got to my house, my daughter helped me carry my suitcase inside. She asked if I wanted her to stay. I said no. I said I was just tired. I needed to rest. She hugged me again. She said to call her if I needed anything. I said I would. She left. I locked the door behind her. I went to every window and checked the locks. I closed all the curtains. I sat on my couch in the dark and just breathed. I was home. I was safe. But I didn't feel it. The first few days back were the worst. I couldn't sleep. Every noise woke me up. A car door closing, the wind against the windows, the house settling. I would lie in bed with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, listening, waiting for something to happen. I stopped answering my phone unless it was my daughter. I let everything else go to voicemail. I didn't check my email. I didn't go outside unless I had to. I ordered groceries online and had them delivered. I kept the curtains closed. I felt like I was hiding. Because I was. My daughter called me every day. She kept asking if I was okay. I kept saying yes. I kept lying. She didn't believe me, but she didn't know what to do. She suggested I see a doctor. She said maybe I picked up a bug in Prague. Maybe I was jet-lagged. Maybe I needed to talk to someone. I said I was fine. I said I just needed time to adjust. But I wasn't fine. I was falling apart. I couldn't stop thinking about that woman in the cafe, about her cold eyes, about the way she said my name. Margaret. Like she knew me. Like she owned me. I kept hearing her voice. "We'll find you." Over and over, in my head, in my dreams. Every moment I was alone. I thought about going to the police. I thought about it constantly. But every time I picked up the phone, I remembered what she said. "If you tell anyone, we'll know." How would they know? I didn't understand how. But I believed they would. These people had reach. They had resources. They tracked me in Prague. They knew where I was staying. They knew my phone number. They knew everything. What was stopping them from knowing if I talked? I couldn't risk it. I couldn't put my daughter in danger. So I stayed quiet. Weeks passed. Nothing happened. No one came to my door. No one called. No threatening messages. Just silence. But the silence didn't comfort me. It made it worse. Because I kept waiting. I kept expecting them to show up, to remind me they were watching, to punish me for something I didn't even do. I started having panic attacks. The first one happened in the grocery store. I forced myself to go. I needed milk. I needed bread. I thought I could handle it. But when I walked down the aisle, I saw a woman with dark hair. She turned and looked at me. For a second, I thought it was her. The woman from the cafe. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. I dropped my basket and walked out. I sat in my car shaking for 20 minutes before I could drive home. After that, I stopped going out completely. My daughter came to visit. She let herself in with the spare key I gave her years ago. She found me sitting on the couch in the same clothes I'd been wearing for 3 days. She looked scared. She sat down next to me. She said, "Mom, what happened in Prague?" I wanted to tell her. I wanted to tell her everything, but I couldn't. I said, "Nothing. I'm just tired." She said, "You're not tired. You're terrified. I can see it. Please talk to me." I shook my head. I said, "I can't." She started crying. She said, "Did someone hurt you?" I said, "No, no one hurt me. I'm fine." But I wasn't fine, and she knew it. She stayed with me that night. She made me dinner. She sat with me and watched TV even though I wasn't really watching. She slept in the guest room. In the morning, she said she wanted me to see a therapist. She said she already called and made an appointment. She said she would go with me. I didn't have the energy to argue. I said okay. The therapist was a woman in her 50s. Kind face, soft voice. She asked me what brought me in. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't tell her the truth. So I said I was having trouble adjusting after my divorce, after retirement, after traveling alone. She nodded. She said that was normal. She said major life changes could trigger anxiety and depression. She asked if I wanted to talk about the trip. I said no. She didn't push. She gave me exercises, breathing techniques, grounding methods. She prescribed medication for anxiety. She said it would help me sleep. I took the prescription. I filled it. I started taking the pills. They helped a little. Not much, but a little. Months passed. Fall turned to winter. My daughter called less. Not because she stopped caring, but because I convinced her I was getting better. I learned to fake it. I learned to sound normal on the phone. I learned to smile when she visited. I learned to lie. But at night, I was still afraid. I still checked the locks. I still listened for footsteps. I still waited for them to come. One night in January, I got a message. Unknown number. My blood went cold. I opened it. It said, "You kept your promise. Good." That was all. Nothing else. Just those 4 words. I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say. But I understood what it meant. They were reminding me. They were still watching. They wanted me to know they hadn't forgotten. I deleted the message. I turned off my phone. I sat in the dark and cried. The next day, I made a decision. I couldn't live like this anymore. I couldn't spend the rest of my life afraid. I had 2 choices. I could keep hiding, or I could take back some piece of my life. I chose the second option. I started small. I went for a walk, just around my block. It was freezing outside. The sidewalks were icy. But I walked. I kept my head up. I looked at houses, at trees, at the sky. I didn't look over my shoulder. I didn't run. I just walked. When I got home, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Proud. The next day, I walked farther. The day after that, I went to the grocery store. I bought milk. I bought bread. I didn't have a panic attack. I paid. I left. I drove home. Slowly, I started putting my life back together. I started answering calls from friends. I went to my book club. I didn't talk much, but I listened. I showed up. I joined a yoga class. The same one I quit before Prague. I went 3 times a week. I forced myself. My daughter noticed. She said I seemed better. She said she was proud of me. I said thank you. I didn't tell her I was still afraid. I didn't tell her I still checked my locks every night. I didn't tell her I still flinched when I saw women with dark hair. But I was functioning. And that was something. Spring came, the snow melted, flowers started blooming. I planted a small garden in my backyard. Tomatoes, herbs, nothing fancy, just something to take care of. Something that needed me. One afternoon, I was outside watering the plants when my neighbor came over. She was an older woman, sweet. We talked sometimes. She said she was glad to see me outside. She said she worried about me over the winter. I said I was doing better. She smiled. She said that was good. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. She said, "You know, a woman came by a few months ago asking about you. I thought it was strange." I froze. I said, "What woman?" She said, "I don't know. Dark hair, maybe 40. She said she was a friend from your trip. She asked if you lived here." I said yes. I hope that was okay. I couldn't breathe. I said, "When was this?" She thought for a moment. She said, "January, maybe, right after New Year's." January, right when I got the message. They didn't just send a text. They came here. They saw where I lived. They confirmed it. My neighbor could see something was wrong. She said, "Are you okay?" I forced a smile. I said, "Yes, I'm fine. I just forgot about her. Thank you for telling me." She nodded. She went back to her house. I stood there holding the hose, water pooling at my feet, my hands shaking. They had been here, at my house. They knew exactly where I lived. They could come back anytime they wanted. I went inside. I locked the door. I sat on the couch. I thought about calling the police. But what would I say? A woman knocked on my neighbor's door months ago. That wasn't a crime. And if I explained the rest, they would ask why I didn't report it sooner. They would ask questions I couldn't answer. And even if they believed me, what could they do? Find a woman with dark hair in Prague. Find people I couldn't identify. It was impossible. I was on my own. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my living room with the lights off. I watched the street through a crack in the curtains, waiting, but no one came. The next few weeks were hard. I slipped back into old patterns, staying inside, avoiding people, jumping at sounds. But I couldn't let it consume me again. I had worked too hard to get back to some version of normal. So I kept going. I kept walking. I kept going to yoga. I kept tending my garden. I forced myself to live. Even if I was afraid. Even if I knew they could find me. I refused to let them take everything. Summer came. The garden grew. Tomatoes ripened. I picked them and made sauce. I gave some to my neighbor, the same one who told me about the woman. She thanked me. She said they were delicious. I smiled. I didn't think about Prague, not in that moment. My daughter visited in July. She brought her boyfriend. I met him for the first time in person. He was nice, polite. He shook my hand. We had dinner in my backyard. We talked and laughed. For a few hours, I felt normal, like the old version of myself, the one who existed before that trip. But at night when they left and I was alone again, the fear came back. It always came back. It's been over a year now since Prague. I still live in the same house. I still check the locks every night. I still think about that woman in the cafe, about Stefan, about the wooden box. I think about how easily I was used, how quickly my life was turned upside down. I never went back to therapy. The pills helped for a while, but I stopped taking them. I didn't like how they made me feel. Numb, disconnected. I wanted to feel things, even the fear. Because the fear reminded me I was still alive. My daughter got engaged last month. She called me crying with happiness. She said they were planning a small wedding in the fall. She asked if I would help. I said yes. I said, of course. She said she loved me. I said I loved her too. After we hung up, I sat on my couch and cried. Not from sadness, from relief. That she was happy. That she had a future. That my mistakes in Prague didn't touch her life. I still don't travel. My daughter asked if I wanted to visit her in Seattle. I said maybe someday. But I know I won't. I can't get on a plane. I can't go to an airport. The thought of going through security, of being in a foreign place, of trusting strangers. I can't do it. Maybe I never will again. Sometimes I think about what I would tell someone who asked me about that trip. I would tell them I went to Prague. I would tell them it was beautiful. I would tell them I saw museums and churches and bridges. I would tell them it was a good experience. I would lie. Because the truth is too heavy, too complicated, too dangerous. I learned something from all of this. I learned that trust is a weapon. People use it against you. They smile and offer help and make you feel safe. And then they use you. They take advantage of your kindness, your loneliness, your need to believe the world is good. I also learned that I'm stronger than I thought. I survived. I got through it. I didn't break completely. I'm still here, still functioning, still living some version of a life. It's not the life I imagined when I booked that trip. It's smaller, quieter, more fearful. But it's mine. I don't regret leaving Richard. I don't regret retiring. I don't even regret wanting to travel. I regret trusting Stefan. I regret buying that box. I regret not listening to the small voice in my head that said something was wrong, but I can't change any of it now. I can only move forward. My garden is doing well. The tomatoes came back this year, bigger than last year. I planted peppers too. And basil. I spend most evenings out there, watering, weeding, watching things grow. It's peaceful. It's safe. No one can hurt me there. I still get the occasional message, not often. Maybe once every few months. Always from a different number. Always short. Just a reminder that they're still out there. That they haven't forgotten. The last one came 2 weeks ago. It said, "Still thinking of Prague?" I didn't respond. I never do. I just delete them and keep living. I don't know if I'll ever feel completely safe again. I don't know if the fear will ever fully go away. But I've learned to live with it. I've learned that survival doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you keep going even when you are. I'm 57 now. My hair is completely gray. I have more lines on my face. I look older than I did a year ago, but I also look different in other ways. Harder maybe, more aware, less naive. I don't smile at strangers anymore. I don't trust easily. I don't believe people when they're too helpful or too kind. I question everything. Some people might say that's sad, that I lost something, and maybe I did. But I also gained something. I gained the knowledge that I can survive, that I can endure, that I'm not as fragile as I thought. My daughter's wedding is in 2 months. I'm helping her plan it. We talk on the phone about flowers and music and food. She's excited. She glows when she talks about her future. I'm happy for her. Genuinely happy. She deserves all of it. She asked me last week if I ever think about traveling again. I said no. She said that made her sad. She said she wished that one bad experience hadn't ruined it for me. I didn't correct her. I didn't say it wasn't just bad. It was terrifying, life-altering, traumatic. I just said maybe someday. Another lie. But a kind one. At night when I'm alone, I sometimes think about the version of myself that walked into that travel agency. The woman who thought a trip to Prague would fix something broken inside her. The woman who believed the world was safe if you were careful. The woman who trusted people. I miss her sometimes, but I also know she's gone. She died in that hotel room the moment I opened that wooden box. This version of me is different. She's cautious. She's afraid. She's damaged. But she's alive. And that has to be enough. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if those people will ever come back, if they'll ever ask me to carry something else, if they'll ever decide I'm too much of a risk. I live with that uncertainty every day. It sits in my chest like a weight. But I carry it. Because I have to. Because there's no other choice. I'm still here. I'm still standing. I'm still Margaret Collins, 57 years old, retired teacher, divorced, mother, survivor. That's who I am now. Not the woman I wanted to be, but the woman I became. And I'm learning to accept that. If you're watching this and you're thinking about traveling alone for the first time, I won't tell you not to go. I won't tell you the world is dangerous. Because it is. But it's also beautiful. It's also worth seeing. Just be careful. Be smart. Don't trust too easily. Don't let your guard down. And if something feels wrong, listen to that feeling. Don't ignore it like I did. Your instincts exist for a reason. Trust them. They might save your life. Before you go, I want to ask you something. If you made it this far, if you listened to my story, please leave a comment. Tell me where you're from. Tell me if you've ever felt afraid like this. Tell me I'm not alone. Subscribe to this channel if you want to hear more stories like mine. Stories about survival, about fear, about ordinary people who ended up in extraordinary circumstances. And if you ever find yourself in trouble, if you ever feel trapped or scared or used, remember this. You're stronger than you think. You can survive. You can get through it. It won't be easy. It won't be the same. But you can do it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Stay safe out there.